When we started Rebels, I just kind of shifted from what I was doing on Clone Wars, and the episodes of Clone Wars that we had done that were very original and dealt more with Ahsoka, more with Captain Rex, more with the clones, more with things that we weren't seeing in the movies, actually felt way more like Star Wars to us. So the idea of coming up with an entirely new crew of people was exactly what I wanted to do. I didn't want to inherit all these histories and timelines of all these other characters.
We wanted it to be true to the original movies in essence, but we wanted it to be a different story with different characters. We wanted it to be a wholly original tapestry in many ways. And very quickly, we settled on the idea that one of the most interesting untold stories, at least untold in the movies, is how did the Rebel Alliance begin?
When we started our show and where we start in our storytelling, we know that there are pockets of people that are deeply dissatisfied with the imperial rule of the galaxy. And that gets personalized, right? And Ezra and his experience on Lothal and the crew of the Ghost and their experience of Lothal. When you come into this story, we're really seeing how grassroots that movement is.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
In many ways, it's the story of a family, 5, 6 strangers from completely different walks of life, in some cases different species, and different ages, different genders, that all come together as this little family, and the ship that is their ship, the Ghost, is like a family home.
When you look at Ezra and he's a kid on the street, he's kind of cocky and, arrogant and doing things for himself, stealing, one of the first things we see him do.
Wait, what are you doing?
Hey, the kid's gotta eat.
But he's covering up a deep hurt that happened to him. His parents were taken away from him. He's a lost, lonely kid at heart. And until he meets Kanan and Hera, he doesn't really have a foundation of anybody that really cares about him or loves him.
We can all relate to Ezra. I mean, we're all on our own hero's journey. We're all kind of the star of our own story. It is nice to kind of go through a lens like that and see the world of Star Wars through a younger kid.
I'm in space.
He's a boy growing up in the time without Jedi really to train him, and he has somewhat of a reluctant master, a reluctant man to take him under his wing. Kanan and Ezra cannot have one without the other. The great thing about them is that they need each other. Kanan needs Ezra to make him a better Jedi, make him a better teacher. And Ezra needs Kanan because he doesn't know anything about the Force or being a Jedi. So they need each other, and that's what makes them a unique team.
One of the things we tried to do on the series was be real about what it would mean for Ezra to have had this ability that he didn't really understand. He didn't know what to call. He didn't know it was the Force. And then when Kanan comes into his life, he has some language that he can now sort of apply to this thing that's always been true of him, but he just didn't know what it was. And so I really wanted to keep the specialness of that and not have it be something that then was just sort of given to him and that we all just sort of took for granted.
Now, I have to know if you are ready.
I am ready. Wait, ready for what?
For a test, a real challenge, one that could determine if you're meant to be a Jedi or not.
From the very beginning, we knew that Kanan should be a Jedi that was very odd because there weren't a lot of Jedi running around in that day and age. And for me to feel all right about it, I thought he can't be this traditional Jedi that was really well schooled. He should be incomplete.
It was very secretive, and it wasn't even called Rebels. You came in and you started reading this dialogue, and if you knew the Star Wars universe, I said straight up in the audition, I was like, is this for Star Wars? And then sort of nodded, and I was like, oh my God, you gotta give me a minute before I read a word of this. How's it going?
Kanan is a Jedi that is very much given up being a Jedi. He was very young when Order 66 and the fall of the Republic happened, so he's recovering his faith in being a Jedi and finding this boy. Ezra very much helps rekindle that flame. I think the fact that Kanan is flawed helps Ezra because he's not dealing with trying to be perfect. He's just trying to be who he is.
I'm not gonna try to teach you anymore. If all I do is try, that means I don't truly believe I can succeed. So from now on, I will teach you. Look, I may fail, you may fail, but there is no try.
Kanan's fears are maybe a bit self-involved at first. Maybe they're insecurities that he might not be the type of master that Ezra needs.
The student is only good as their teacher is. The mistakes Ezra makes, those are Kanan's fault. The successes that Ezra has, those are Kanan's fault. Does Kanan think he's a good teacher? I don't think he does. But it's important character-wise that he's not a great teacher.
But he loves Ezra, and I think that also adds to the whole relationship, and that Ezra knows at the end of the day, the one person he can trust is Kanan.
When you have a young character like Ezra, and it's really his journey that is sort of at the heart of the show, you wanted to see how he's evolving. And certainly the events of season 2 were about his worldview just expanding because he got off of Lothal and had the opportunity to meet a variety of characters and experience a variety of things. He realized how much bigger the galaxy was and experienced both the good and the dark of that.
I think Taylor would readily admit that at the beginning he didn't really know a lot about Star Wars. The dynamic in the series was real as we were recording it. Freddie, from their experience with Star Wars, was the wiser Jedi of the two, and Taylor was eager to learn from him.
I encourage him to not be afraid to fail and don't be afraid to do something crazy.
What?
He would take me aside a lot. We'd hang out outside of set a lot, and that was really in that stage of them growing together as a master and an apprentice.
One of the most interesting times was when Sam Witwer was there, and then you had Darth Maul on one side of Taylor and Freddie on the other, and Sam is, you know, preaching to Taylor his views of the Force, and Freddie his on the other. I mean, I'm watching this, I'm like, wow, it's just like the show.
My apprentice is activating the temple.
The dark side is so strong that at the end of season 2, I remember having a talk with Dave, and I was like, are we going like fully towards that? Because there was a sense of when Maul is calling him his apprentice, where Dave would say, just suspend it all and go with that. Believe that that is the way that you're gonna go for the sake of the character, because at that moment, he doesn't know what he's gonna be doing a year from then.
As he's gotten further and further down this path of being frightened by Vader and the power of these Inquisitors in season 2, he begins to make the natural connection that, well, the only way I can fight back is to be more powerful than these people trying to hurt me.
How are we supposed to win if we don't fight back?
That's really fear talking. So, you know, Yoda warns him.
How did I choose to win? The question is.
So Ezra really sees it as he's the reason they all went to Malachor. He believes that's all his fault. If I hadn't come up with the way that we need to gain more power to fight back, then we never would have been there in the first place. Then Kanan wouldn't be blind and Ahsoka wouldn't be gone. His reaction to all of that then is he starts to acquire more power. And it's not really until he and Kanan come to an understanding and they forgive each other for being in the situation where they, you know, are able to abate this destructive path they're both on.
The things that ultimately pull him back are always the relationships, always the people that he's come to care about and who care about him and who care about him enough to sort of reach out and pull him back if he's sort of going in the wrong direction.
He chooses them over his fears. And Kanan's example in the end to Ezra very much saves him and gives him a key on how to live his life and do things for the benefit of others, not just himself.
Hey, you brought him on board. And then again, you've never been very good at choosing partners.
I chose you, didn't I?
No, I chose you.
Hera is a bit of a unique character in Star Wars in that one of the most underserved character types in Star Wars is the mother. Hera became an important character to us because of what she could represent in this family dynamic. She can also represent to Ezra as this boy a guiding aspect in balance with Kanan. She is wise, she is brave, she is daring. She is all of those things we know about hero characters, but she's also nurturing. She's also, you know, can be soft-spoken to him when he needs to be. So you get this dynamic of kind of a father in Cain and a mother in Hera and a son in Ezra and a daughter in Sabine.
I'm proud of you. You stepped up and took the lead. Kanan has taught you well.
So have you.
She obviously is sort of the mom of the group. That makes her even more interesting. But that speaks to her generosity of spirit.
Whoever's responsible for this had to have a strong signal array to control Chopper at such a distance.
So
I'm going to reverse the feed on them and send back a bit more power than they expect.
She has all of that moxie, but at the same time, she's very kind and loving, and that's ultimately what guides her. That's a pretty interesting combination of brains, brawn, and heart.
Hera ended up being the character that we all felt had a really focused and clear point of view about the need for the rebellion, and that she was going to be the person in the family that really held that set of ideals very clearly and strategically, because she was a leader and truly a military leader.
When you and I started together, it was rob from the Empire, give to the needy, a noble cause. But now we're getting drawn into some kind of military thing, and I don't like it.
We are fighting a bigger fight.
Kanan, I think, is the perceived head of this organization, of the crew of the Ghost. But Hera is the captain, and his relationship with Hera is much different than anyone else aboard the ship.
Kanan and Hera, the way they are is, and the way people felt about them is the way they were. I didn't have to alter anything but what the fans wanted. I mean, I always knew when they started, if you watch the very first short, that the two have a close relationship and that they indeed had a romantic relationship. You know, prior to our show, they were pretty much together. And they're together but apart when the show begins. And, you know, it's a constant struggle with their greater duty to the galaxy and people around them, and what they might personally want for their lives.
When are you going to feel you've done enough for this rebellion?
I guess when the Empire is overthrown and people are free to live their lives the way they want again.
And when that time comes, how do you want to live your life?
I don't know. Guess I never really thought about it.
So I guess you really never thought about us.
What fans came to feel and the magnetism that they wanted them drawn together is exactly what, you know, we had planned and were trying to write to the whole time. It's just a question of, will these feelings come out, and what is the implication of that? What does it mean? And what is lost then after you admit to having these feelings? Those are the things that we were going after. You definitely see that with Freddie and Vanessa and the chemistry and the talent they have as actors and performers.
Whatever you're facing, I wanted us to face it together.
We'll see each other again. I promise.
They can't help the affection that they have for one another, but obviously the stakes are so high, there simply isn't time for any sort of frivolous romance. And then luckily, in the end, they have a more clear demonstration of their affection, which arguably you would think the stakes are even worse at that point.
Kanan! I know what to say now. I love you.
Jason's Pendula is a nod to the EU fans that liked Jason's solo.
It felt right and felt like a fitting conclusion to that relationship that everybody was very invested in.
I think Jason represents a poignant, hopeful ending for Hera's arc on the show and her relationship with Kanan. She suffered so much loss when he died, and I think this is a beautiful way for her to nurture one of her own.
Sabine is a disgruntled young woman who was obviously had family history of problems, super intelligent, but she's running with these rebels because, you know, she's hiding and she's afraid to get close to people, and then she doesn't think anybody trusts her, and she has real issues with that.
I'm sorry for the attitude. It's just, things seem to be getting more dangerous every day, and I need to know that you and Kanan can trust me.
We trust you, Sabine. We just can't tell you everything. It's for the safety of the whole crew. If captured, you can't reveal what you don't know.
You think I'd talk? When we first started, I thought, oh, Sabine is wise beyond her years. I forget that she's a teenager because she's so good at everything she tries her hand at. Bye-bye, Buckethead. She's always got a plan, and she's ready to execute that plan. She's sort of fearless. She's amazing. She's you know, kind of inspiring in that way.
Sabine just grew and grew and grew as a character. But we were really able to discover the character on a deeper level because Tia started asking a lot of questions, and they became questions that we had to answer whether we were telling the story about that moment or not.
It became really interesting to all of us to think about Sabine's journey and to see how her experience with this family might actually color her relationship to her family at home on Mandalore.
I've told you before, Fulcrum's intel is on a need-to-know basis.
And I told you before, I need to know more.
So you get this dynamic of a mother in Hera and a daughter in Sabine. We have nice episodes, I think, between her and Sabine where you get to see a foreshadowing of Sabine working out her problems with her own mother as she works them out with Hera first.
I know you have questions. Questions I can't answer right now. But know that I trust you. I just trusted you with my life down there.
I know. I know you do.
It was really important for her to be healed, right? To be able to return home and to be able to reconcile those relationships. The Darksaber itself gives Kanan and Sabine a reason to come together, and more insight into Sabine as a Mandalorian, how she relates to her family, how she feels about her people, and how she comes to understand leadership in a new way.
We wanted Sabine to be more than just a character on the side. We didn't want her to be a romantic interest for Ezra. We didn't want her to just be the specialist. She had to have a fully developed emotional range, and that's never more on screen than when she does get asked to carry the Darksaber, and that brings up all of her family history and all of her struggles, and how Kanan struggles with that as the father figure.
So what do you want me to do?
Give her the sword. Let her own it and who she is. Help Sabine face her demons.
I don't know.
I know you don't, but this isn't about you.
Kanan is new to all this and is learning how to be a teacher, so yeah, it's a process for him too. He's not a master. So when he steps out of that, there's no sympathy, there's no patience, there's no tolerance, and at the same time, it's 'cause he loves her and he cares about her and he knows what this blade is gonna represent, so he has to teach her self-reliance.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
The blade feels lighter.
You're connecting with it. It's becoming a part of you.
With the Darksaber, it's a testament to how much she has matured, that she knows it's not hers to keep, and that she finds the rightful owner to take that weapon and use it for good.
And that's when Star Wars is at its best, when we are relating to it, not because it's a galaxy far, far away, but because it feels like something that happens in our everyday life. We just experience it through the fantastic, which is the Star Wars universe.
The kid got grabbed, okay?
Zeb, for me, was always a family member. He came in, he was introduced as a warrior, but I saw him as a family member, and he had a very specific place in this family. I saw him first as antagonistic big brother to Ezra.
Kid, you wake me, you die.
That's how our relationship began, but I feel like as the series evolved, his relationship with Ezra evolved into less of an antagonistic thing and more of a protector and crewmate, and almost a father figure in some sense, too.
You can do this, Zeb. I know it.
The thing that changed for me with Zeb was, there were two moments. There was one when he was with Callus, where he actually went to a vulnerable place and started talking about his backstory and Callus's backstory and the bonding that they had over that.
Well, you can't judge all assaults as the same.
Does that sentiment apply to Imperials?
Well, the Imperials I know. But even more profoundly so was that episode where they're on the ship going to Lyrasan and realizing that some of his people are still alive, and realizing also that he has this connection with the Force that they call the Ashla. That took on a whole different dimension for Zeb that I wasn't expecting. That gave a little more weight to him for me, and a little more responsibility for him as a character, too.
You, Lasat! Face me!
In season 1, you think more of Callus as somebody that will be Zeb's person to overthrow in the end, but to defeat the dark side, You have to understand, you have to start forgiving people and accepting people and seeing, again, somebody else's point of view and understanding their concerns and problems and meeting people halfway. And Callus and Zeb kind of do that.
I was only doing my duty. It was nothing personal.
They learn to begrudgingly at first respect one another. They help one another. And then in the end, they find a better kind of peace and enlightenment because they're willing to forgive one another, especially Zeb forgive Callus. And this is why you see at the end of Rebels, Zeb take Callus on this journey across the Sea of Stars, this undying lands where his people are reborn, because that's what friends do for one another.
Kid, how about you get that rust bucket under control?
Greatest way to describe Chopper to somebody is if R2-D2 is a dog, Chopper's a cat. Chopper does things when Chopper feels like it.
Chopper, the droid, just has attitude with everybody, so I guess he doesn't respect me at all.
Oh, he's impossible.
He's miserable to work with.
Welcome.
He's a diva. Comes into sessions demanding things, eating all the good food, leaks oil. Disgusting. He's really disgusting. I should have seen that coming.
He's so well defined and so well done that my favorite moment is when Chopper grabs her hand. That was a beautiful, comforting moment.
Freddie was always adamant that he had to die because there has to be an example of how to really obtain another level, how to become selfless, how to do everything for everybody else.
And so for him to go out in a way that it proved that he was a proper Jedi and proved it not just to himself but to everyone felt really fitting. That was something that we arrived at that felt right to everybody.
For Kanan to go from being this how you doing kind of swashbuckling cowboy to this is what I have to do, not for me, but for everybody else, is quite a evolution. And what's tragic in the end is he does it even at the expense of this great personal love he has for Hera.
Well, I think she's absolutely shattered, and I think for the first time she's without a plan. That's a huge difference from season 1, where she's the ringleader. It's important to see that impact, and they do sort of rebuild themselves in a very different way, and sacrifices are made, and it was not in vain.
The way Dave told us, we had just gotten to a session. We were all together, and he actually showed us on a laptop the sort of sketch art of the scene. And I cried. I know Vanessa cried.
He's gone.
Personally, for me, I was depressed about it. I was really, really upset. I know that this stuff happens in Star Wars, and that's what happens in real life, and it's brutal.
These characters and the actors who voice them are so intrinsically linked for me. Like, when I think of Hera, I think of Vanessa. Our relationship with each other so closely mirrors our characters' relationships with each other, but it also felt very sad that we were gonna lose Freddie.
He's gone now, isn't he? I mean, really gone.
Yes. I know what we have to do now. This was the biggest lesson that Kanan has ever taught Ezra, and I think it's the last lesson for him that he's gonna get from Kanan in just selflessness and when to do the right thing.
When we decided that season 4 would be the last season, it gave us an incredible amount of focus and purpose and intention with the story we were about to tell with Ezra. And Sabine on this journey together to take up the mantle of leadership.
Sabine's pairing with Ezra as almost this dual hero makes it better, makes it a little more unique. They really need each other in the end. And when you think about it in the very beginning, in the first episode, she is the one that gives him a chance. Because she lands on that crate, she could take him out right there, and she doesn't.
If the big guy catches you, he'll end you. Good luck.
It just became really clear that there was this kind of sibling relationship that was emerging between them that was really natural and kind of beautiful. and that they were both learning things together about what it meant to fight for something.
And now he's really counting on her.
What we knew was that Ezra had to face, as every hero does, the things that were his greatest fears or weak spots. And certainly the loss of his parents is at the top of that list.
Mom? Dad?
And I think that having the Emperor's presence was also something that felt like it created a greater sense of sort of spiritual danger for Ezra than he's ever really been in before, but that he ultimately wouldn't even want to undo all the things that have happened because he saw the value of the family that he'd built and the value of all the things that they'd been doing together. So it really propels him into the final problem of Thrawn over the city in a way that was so uniquely his.
Admiral, we have incoming.
Take a look.
How does he win in a way that feels like Ezra? It was a little bit weird, unorthodox, and a little surprising, and yet also really clever. He doesn't know where he's gonna end up, and he still makes the choice to jump away. It just feels right for him.
By the end, he really comes into his own and seizes the moment. And I think you see the maturity of him over the years and his understanding of the world. Taylor created a great hero in Ezra, one that boys and girls of all ages can aspire to be.
Ezra, he's experienced so many different things, and it's been a real blast playing this character, and especially someone with the Force.
When you look at the key moments that all the actors had to portray for their characters, they all just crush it. They're fantastic. Now, Ahsoka, she's played a part in Ezra's life. So her showing up at the end as a guide for Sabine makes a lot of sense. It's within the show structure itself. Nothing really ever ends. Things end, they begin, they end, they begin. So the end of Rebels is just the beginning of another story. And in this way, it's a story even more focused on Sabine and what she's become. These two women that I think are super strong, interesting characters ride off into the future. What will happen? What adventures do they have? I find that interesting.